certainly clicking on all cylinders. Its sister team at Alpha Tauri, not so much. Not sure if you saw some of the comments or suggestions that were made that Helmut Marko is not thrilled with Alpha Tauri rookie driver Nyck de Vries. Is it true? Have we got it confirmed that he did give some kind of warning to Nyck de Vries that he needs to be improving here shortly, or he possibly could be replaced later on in the season?
Yeah, it certainly seems so. So I know for a fact that within the team, the word that was used to me by a couple of different people at the team is that they've been underwhelmed by him. You know, came in with quite a lot of hype last year based on what he did on that debut with Williams. As for Marko, I haven't had that confirmed. I'm not sure Laurence has either, but it definitely isn't out of step with what we've come to expect from Helmut Marko. I mean, he's one of the most demanding people in Formula One. Ex-Red Bull drivers will tell you the most horrifying thing they ever saw on a Sunday evening after a race would be their phone lighting up that says Helmut Marko's calling, because they know he only calls when he's got some harsh word. He very rarely will call you and say, "Oh, you did a great job today." He's usually calling you to say, you know, what the hell are you doing? I mean, Daniel Ricciardo, who funnily enough is in the middle of this story, said that used to terrify him. When that call would come, he said you'd have to answer it on the first or second ring. Otherwise he'd have a second reason to be annoyed with you. Not only is he calling you to, you know, to have some stern words with you, but he's also like, well, why on earth did you leave this ring for a while? So wouldn't be out of step. And and I think given that de Vries hasn't come in from the Red Bull system, I think there's less loyalty than maybe they've got towards someone like Yuki Tsunoda, who did spend a bit of time kind of not maybe impressing in the way he should have done. But I think he's been given a much longer leash than, say, de Vries has been so far.
That was the exact word I was going to use. It seems like, Laurence, he's on a short leash. I mean, he's only 5 races into the season with this new team. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's only 5 races or 6 races now into his F1 career, because, of course, he had that one with Williams last year. Mm-hmm. This is fairly normal for rookies to take a little while to get up to speed. So I think it is a bit unfair, but it is the nature of the Red Bull system as well. And I think the expectation with Nyck was that he would come into the team and hit the ground running a little bit more, just because of his experience outside of Formula One. He's relatively old for a rookie, I think 28 years old, and he had that experience in Formula E, was a Formula E champion. Mm-hmm. And I think there was just this expectation that by bringing him in, of course, he replaced Pierre Gasly when Gasly made it quite clear that he wanted to go and drive elsewhere. Alpine had an opportunity. And so they brought de Vries in, hoping that he would be able to just get straight in there and get the job done. And that's hard. That's really hard in Formula One. You know, there's an awful lot going on. There can be just the most minute bits of bad luck which spiral into something far worse. And so I think realistically he needs to be given a bit more time, but it's not the way of the Red Bull driver program, really. You know, they like to keep the pressure on the drivers, and it's a real sink or swim environment. And I feel like de Vries would improve going to a number of tracks which he probably knows a little bit better. He's done a lot of racing in Europe during his career, so I feel like the next 3 circuits, Imola, Monaco, is a bit unusual, but he has raced there before in Formula 2. And then Spain, which is a track that a lot of drivers know quite well, should give him a chance to settle and hopefully get the results that Helmut Marko is looking for.
Yeah, hopefully so. And Nate, you mentioned Daniel Ricciardo, obviously friend of the show. When these reports came out that Marko was obviously not happy with de Vries' lack of performance thus far, many concluded that Daniel Ricciardo would be in line to take that seat should he be removed. You've debunked those rumors, though.
Yeah, somebody called me the Ricciardo Whisperer on Twitter, which I found was quite funny. So it was bizarre because that report came out saying that Ricciardo had gone to Faenza and had a seat fitting there. Wasn't quite true. He had a seat fitting behind closed doors in Miami, which was because Liam Lawson wasn't at the Miami Grand Prix. He's actually Alpha Tauri's reserve driver. He's a Red Bull Junior driver. So in the instance that Ricciardo was needed, he obviously needed to have a seat fitting. He had one in Australia for Red Bull. He actually went to Europe for the wedding of Chloe Stroll, sister of Lance, and his friend Scotty James, which was in Venice, which looks unbelievable. If anyone checks out on Instagram, how the other half live is crazy. I was so jealous looking at all those photos.
People said it was the F1 royal wedding. If you're curious,
as close as you're going to get to it. I mean, it seemed like there was a lot of big names there. But on Ricciardo, from everything I know from those close to Ricciardo, and also from people at Red Bull as well, who I spoke to last week when this kind of news was coming out, is there's been absolutely no overtures made to Ricciardo about this seat. There's Helmut Marko's not spoken to him yet. It's been casually mentioned in conversations like, at some point, we might need you. And I think Ricciardo has kept the same line throughout this, both privately and publicly, is that he's really not that interested in driving anywhere other than one of the top teams. I think that still applies this season. From CAA's point of view, CAA are the guys that represent him, obviously. For one thing that was pointed out to me was that if he was to sit in at Alpha Tauri, that's a whole new contract he needs to draw up. He's got a very, very good contract at the moment, which is a lot of marketing opportunities. And obviously he's going to test the car later this year, but it's given him a lot of freedom to do things away from Formula One that I think if he raced, he suddenly has to give some of those things up. There's a lot of things he's doing away from the sport this year. So I just don't see it ever fitting. I mean, in a few races time, he might have that bug and he might say, I want to kind of come back into it. But one thing I was told, just to wrap this up, was that people, I think the riskier option would be seen as taking an opportunity at Alpha Tauri. If you go in there and you struggle to beat Yuki, who at the moment is in really good form, which is kind of, I think, has made Nyck de Vries' life a bit more difficult. If you go and do that, any chance Ricciardo has of a top line seat somewhere else, I think, is gone. It's pretty slim anyway, I would say. But any chance he had of that, any chance he had of maybe jumping in and replacing Perez at some point, if that eventuality came, I think you'd basically close the door on it. So every indication I have is that if de Vries does go, Liam Lawson, who's currently racing in Super Formula in Japan, would be the guy that would get that seat. If there's a reason Red Bull have their junior drivers, and they would want to support him in that situation. So I know it's a great opportunity, and we'd all love to see Ricciardo racing, but I just can't see an eventuality. Maybe for one race, I think that might be a possibility. If de Vries did go, they're like, right, we need you to jump in this weekend, and then we're going to find someone else longer term. But yeah, becoming Alpha Tauri's driver for the rest of the season, I would bet pretty much everything that I'd be willing to bet, because these things can come and hit you in the face. But yeah, I would be stunned if Ricciardo raced there in any meaningful capacity this year.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube, and for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app, and for premium content plus live streaming, make sure to subscribe to ESPN Player.